is something that we've all thought, at least in the past year, at least one time, right? Or what parts of it, and the real future of insights professionals. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. This will be an interactive session, so be prepared. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. But first, I want to introduce Tim. Tim, if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself and let the audience know who you are.
Excellent. Hi, Tim Sanders here, Chief Innovation Officer at G2. I joined G2 August 2024 as the Vice President of Research Insights. My role has changed. I now roam across our largest customers, analyst firms, and internally seeking places where we can establish AI leverage. I'm also an executive fellow at Harvard Business School. I advise the Digital Data Design Institute, which is their AI research lab. That's where we think a lot about what are the social economic impacts of artificial intelligence. I'm more on team acceleration than team safety.
Awesome. And I'm Dan Fleetwood. I'm the President of Research at QuestionPro. I spend a lot of my day-to-day thinking about how AI can help out researchers, such as a lot of yourselves here. And I'm also a host of the Happy Market Research podcast as well, so that's something I enjoy doing. And really what we want to talk to you today about is how this session will work. So we want to do an interactive session around AI and some different questions around will take your job, what do you think about it? So this is how it will work. You can take your phones out. I'll bring up a live flow in a minute, but we're going to be using your phone, and then we'll reveal the results instantly. And then Tim and I will banter back and forth about that. So what I'm going to do is go to this. You can either go to the QR code or go to QuestionPro.io and enter that code in, and then we will get started here shortly. You're all taking pictures of it. So nice.
Remember when people said QR codes are useless, they're silly, all the jokes about QR codes, and here we are. One of the best distribution vehicles of live events.
All right, so we got about 20 people or so. We'll give people a few more seconds to join. All right, is everyone in that wants to be in? All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Cool, so you will have 30 seconds to vote. So the first one, do you think AI will take your job? Yes, it's inevitable.
Oh.
Oops, sorry about that. Hold on.
And I'd like to frame this question for everybody. In the book, one of the books, where is it in the book?
There you go.
This is one of the things I'm going to reference during the talk. This is my favorite new book on artificial intelligence. It's called Reshuffle, Saying Greek Chowderway. It's one of the best definitions of what I've heard a job is. A human job is a collection of tasks, roles, and responsibilities that address a constraint in a company's operating model. That's what a job does. It addresses a constraint. You do a series of things. You negotiate a series of things. You make a series of judgment calls. That's what a job is.
The code changed.
Oftentimes, your shirts say a job is merely a collection of tasks. That's not true. When you audit an HBS and job, at least 30% of that job is intangible, and it accounts for the idea that it's a goal-seeking form of employment, not just a task execution form of employment, like what a contractor might do.
All right, if you guys just join real quick again, sorry about that.
Sorry about that, bro.
It's all good. Things happen, you know. All right, give you guys a few seconds here. All right, here we go. Gonna get in. Everyone's in now. Cool. All right. So, do you think AI will take your job? Yes, it's inevitable. I don't know why it's doing that.
Oh, it's the new feature. Just go to the next question.
All right, that's fine. So yes, do you think AI will take your job? So Tim, what do you think about this in terms of, will it take people's jobs? Will it take parts of it? What do you think about that?
Henry Ford often said, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're also right. And that's how I think about this question. If you think it's going to take your job, then what's happening in your mind is you've appraised it as a threat. It's producing stress. It raises barriers, and your narrative will be around AI is bad. It hallucinates, it makes shit up, it produces slop, and you will go slower at adapting to it. So if you think it's going to take your job, it probably will take your value out of the equation, right? So when I look at this question, the bigger question I ask is, will AI double my value in 5 years? Why is this important? Because everyone around you that's an investor will double their value in 5 years. So I worry more that AI will commoditize people that cling to manual work.
Yeah.
and insist that, cutting and copying Google Blue links into a spreadsheet is my form of bonsai gardening. No, it's not. It's not that at all. It's artisanal. So I really think of framing the question that way. Is it going to double your value? It's just as important to ask. But anyway, is it going to cause you to be serial and avoid? I guess that's the big question. And I think less about that question about me. I think those of us in the room are probably all okay. Maybe it's our kids. Maybe it's people that we know that are stuck in a clerical administrative job. They don't have the financial wherewithal, the adaptive capacity to move. I do worry about that.
Yeah.
Because we have no idea how fast AI will diffuse. So even though it's clear that in the long run it creates more jobs and growth, what happens in the short run is the pressing social question here. That's why companies need to be so concerned about retraining and have a moral obligation to do it, like banks did in the 70s when ATMs came out and they retrained tellers to do more important, higher order work.
Yeah, but I actually think Diane's got it right here. It'll take parts of it. And I think that's a key question to ask here, because it probably won't take all of it, but it will take certain parts
The
of it.
DPS reports are definitely a target.
We don't put them on Saturdays anymore, Tim, so that's it.
I don't go to Google. That's like one of the biggest changes in my life is that when I do inside work, which I still do in my new work, all the retrieval is now done by an agent that I have like trained and retrained and created markdown files for. So I no longer do Google Blue Link hell. I now have a way for my agent through MCP to attach to my Harvard key, which gives me all the MBER research and all the Gartner, Forrester, paywall stuff you can imagine. So all the retrieval is being done. The pressure on me now is to do a better job at stating my goals and providing context.
Cool.
Right? So
the next question here is, how often are you using AI tools in your research today? Is it daily, weekly, occasionally, never? What are you guys saying here? So daily's coming in, occasionally. Thank goodness there's no never. 2 years ago it may have been never.
I remember when my son started to text me 25 years ago, and I'm like, I'm never going to text people. That is so intrusive. That is so rude. Email me for it. Here we are, right? Let me give you a way to think about this. So, James Clear wrote a great book called Atomic Habits. He also talks to a lot of people about what are your atomic habits around AI transformation. The analogy he uses is like being physically fit. Like a person can't say like, I'm into physical fitness because I did a sit-up on Tuesday and then I jumped and did 2 push-ups on Thursday. A lot of people that talk to me about they've adopted AI are like those people. They do occasional things. That doesn't mean they're committed to fitness. So the best way to measure AI fluency is to look at how many hours a week you're in the tool working. Giving it goals, discerning outputs, refining outputs, putting things into production. A good place to start is 4 hours a week, just like going to the gym. 4 hours a week is a good starting point. People I know in insights that are rocking it, doubling their value, are probably in it 12 to 20 hours a week.
And I think there was a McKinsey study too that came out that said, while it's being talked about a lot, it hasn't really integrated into the deep workflows inside of organizations, but still, a lot of it is being sort of cursory and
It's ad hoc,
ad hoc and checking it out, and not that deep workflow that I think everybody wants to have eventually.
It's kind of one of those like I could have had a VA moments. I'm showing my age in the 60s here, but if you remember the campaign, I could have had a VA. I think people think about general purpose tools like ChatGPT like that. Oh, I could have used that. I wasted all that time. But I think your point, right, is like how many people are like stepping back, looking at their workflow. Because that's what I think I do now when I think about like producing insight content. I had to really figure out my workflow. When Ethan Mollick wrote a really, really good blog post about this idea that most of us aren't really aware of our workflows. But once you kind of start looking at the workflow, you start seeing these targets where machine prediction could actually enable you to do human thinking.
Right. So that's good, and a lot of it has to do with what you mentioned, what you guys answered on the previous question too. It'll take parts of it. I think this is it too, of what parts of that workflow, right, the whole workflow can you replace, so.
Like, give me an example of like, what are some of the parts, like you and I both share this, I have quarterly reports that have, we do third-party surveys, we look at G2 data, like terabytes of data, and parse it, and then produce like a 30-page report. Talk to me about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing now to apply artificial intelligence to parts of your work?
Parts of my workflow, a lot of it is like my day-to-day job of using it to help out with like reports and like you mentioned, but a lot of it is thinking about how it will help the researcher out. So everything from just taking a Word document, uploading that, and boom, your questions are there. All the way to, hey, I have a prompt that I want to enter in about a research question. It'll create the survey, it'll do the fielding, it'll do the reporting. So everything from that, the research workflow there. So it kind of depends on the different parts of it. But
let's talk about surveys, because that's a big part of my life and part of your life.
Yeah, for sure.
I do 46 a year, and they're a source of great expense, but great insights. So these days, I like to think about my agent can help me understand if I'm looking at the right focus areas for the report based on market demand, or what they call frontier knowledge, right? So like, if you were able to go look at all the prompts for the market you're actually writing for, what are all the unanswered questions? And so what kind of helps me think, okay, because obviously I don't want to like reinforce things people already know in one of our reports. We want to point out novel insights. That's been helpful. And then it's also been helpful through the survey process of like the questions, the answers, the skip logic about how much noise and bias you're introducing in certain wording.
Yeah.
That's been super helpful too. And like, because you can measure noise 0 to 100, and when you want to get noise of a survey below 20%, it takes you so much time as a human to do that, and you probably have to launch a sample survey. Machines are good at that. And then on the back end, when I get back surveys, now I can take raw data and have it produce beautiful charts, not images, charts. That plot is Python. The last agents report we did have 40 charts in it. We trained it on McKinsey charts. It did all of them. I had an agency, I didn't have to wait on my creative team during charts. So I find it like different parts of the process where it did not help me was writing.
Yes.
I won't have better write for me because I have an insane stoner brain and I have nuances. And it will correct, it will make me quite average as a writer. So there's still these parts of the process I don't let it address.
makes sense, yeah. Cool, let's go on to the next question here and see what you guys think about this. Which area of market research will AI impact the most over the next 2 years? Is it survey design? Is it analysis and reporting? Qualitative methods, sampling and field market automation? Or is it strategic consulting and storytelling? So the results are coming in, data analysis and reporting, it makes sense. Survey design and scripting. Qualitative methods.
I'll give you an example. I like this with the data analysis, but I use it for different reasons than one would think. I don't really use it to like inform my writing as much as I use it to put the agent in the role of being a publicist and looking at a survey set of results and asking, what would reporters at these 10 targets get excited about? And then, by the way, only show me targets that have high AI visibility based on like profound. So don't point me to some media outlet that has everything behind the four walls, because AI doesn't see that. Only show me what reporters at places like TechCrunch and The Verve or whatever that we know have. So that's been really great because it'll pop out things. Like even getting ready for this, my agent said, oh, let's make sure and talk about the fact that even though AI isn't coming for our jobs, it will disproportionately affect women because of their lack of presence in AI STEM leadership because of long-standing bias, right? So that's fascinating. I wouldn't have thought of that on my own.
Yeah, that's a good
From the
point.
bookings and other research we talked about, that is exactly the insight here.
Yes, exactly. And then I think from a more practical standpoint, right now AI is doing, obviously, you guys probably know this, if not, I definitely recommend checking this out because nobody likes coding open ends. It's making large data sets of unstructured data and coding it probably as good as a human can. Obviously, you need some oversight. I think that's where researchers can always come in, and they'll never replace us, I think, fully. And I think that's one area that is really obviously good now. But I think another key component is synthetic data. Obviously, for synthetic data and modeling here, this will become even more important, I think, in the years to come. But it still needs to be backed by trusted human sources, and I think built on that.
So let's talk about synthetic data, because that's something that we study in the lab at Harvard. It's a fascinating concept. Can you create synthetic audiences? Can you create digital twins of your ICP? Can you create large volumes of synthetic data from small volume? A classic example is when you're trying to measure AI citations and you start with a small sample of prompts, and then you synthetically expand those prompts for like a brute force test to see what your... The problem is if the sample, the mother, they call it the mother, if it's wrong, the whole thing's wrong. So I was interviewing someone who works at a medical supply company. She ran she's running customer service. She's worried a lot about AI's impact on CSRs, right? So they're working on an automation project. They wanted to do synthetic data to do more predictive work on automating parts of customer service. But the problem is their data was currently messy, unstructured, and unlabeled. She raised her hand and said, I want to solve that constraint. She's been promoted now. So she's a senior manager over the group instead of a CSR1, because her job now is to, using human discernment and judgment, properly categorize and label data to train the agent. And that's where she's made this decision. And you can Google Better Up, the researchers. She made this decision based on an article she read to be a pilot, not a passenger. And so she said, okay, well, AI's created a new constraint in the organization, like what Reshuffle talks about, and I want to be the person that works on that. So I love synthetic data, but there's a constraint to be solved, and that's data hygiene and context engineering, and humans are good at that because we have lateral worldview.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on to the next question here, and the next question is, how much do you trust AI-generated insights today? So this is probably, you completely trust it, not much, not at all, somewhat, with human review. All right, so you guys are on to something here at the 100%.
I love this question. Let's go back to the physical fitness example. How much do you trust your workout routine to improve your health? Well, it depends. I have a trainer, so I absolutely trust that. Or are you one of those people that looks like a frog? You see these people at the gym, they go there, they go, and they leave. How much do they probably trust it too much, right? So I think with me, AI and trust is, as Sam Altman would say, largely a skills issue. It's largely a skills issue. How good are your prompts? What's your discernment muscle look like? In other words, like Malcolm Gladwell, the book Blink, he talked about the art gallery dealer. She could look at a painting and say, that's not right. That's a muscle that people build up over time based on feedback. So I think this is a fascinating question. I like human review, but remember, human in the loop is a short-term solution, creates a long-term friction towards actually creating value and velocity. Or human in the loop can actually slow down the work as research proves. So we take comfort in it, but we also need to keep pushing ourselves on how can the AI require less oversight? Because you and I talk all the time about trust gaps. When you think about the gap between the reliability of AI and our acceptance of it, that gap will define rich poor in 5 years in AI. Not how much money people spent, but whether or not they could actually trust it enough to use it. And if you look at cloud computing, 2006, 2021, that trust gap cost American companies, US alone, $44 billion a year in dead weight loss, waiting for cloud to be perfect. So I think this is a fascinating answer. 89% super encouraging. I've been at events where it'd be 50-50. Because again, the narrative that AI produces slop is a natural reaction to the fear of AI displacement.
So what do you say, the two most reasons that I see people not trusting AI is, one, AI is a yes man, right? Like it wants to please, I feel like. And then
it's really hard to program that out.
And then hallucinations, right? So
sort of. Hallucination is a confabulation of data, usually solved by a lack of context engineering. It's not purposely trying to lie to you. You didn't give it the context, right? So it's not fiction as much as confabulation. And one of the things we've been studying, and I find this fascinating, is that, hey, humans hallucinate too. We've never accounted for that. Like I was at a JP Morgan event, the president's like, people tell me AI hallucinates if you met some of my junior associates. When you study humans confabulation, like believing a TikTok video is real news, not fake news, and then telling all their friends to go do something about it, that's a hallucination, right? Human hallucinations gone up an average of 2% every year since 2020. But LLM hallucination drops 99% every year. So there's a conversion coming where we're really going to have to step back and ask the question, compared to what? Do I trust AI insights? Compared to what? The contractor I hired to do pre-work for me, the junior associate I hired to do pre-analysis. So I think it's a relative question.
Do you think that's why the researchers are so important today? Because they have this, you talk about a lot about discernment, right? And having this discernment in the data that's coming from ChatGPT or whatever source you're using.
It's so important, right? It's the Rick Rubin economy.
Yeah.
I have to credit that to MIT's Professor John Wharton. Like when you think about Rick Rubin, Rick Rubin's muscle is taste and conviction. That's what makes him, he's won 9 Grammys, 35 platinum records. He doesn't play an instrument, can't even move around a mixing board. He didn't come up through the cast system of engineers that did repetitive batch editing and chord wrapping and all that rinse and repeat work. He started a record company when he was 19. His first 6 records failed. He went to the stores to find out why they didn't sell. He talked to radio DJs to talk about why they didn't get played. He learned to notice charts worked. And then he found the Beastie Boys at a frat party. And then he championed Public Enemy. And then he produced everybody. Tom Petty, Mick Jagger, Red Hot Chili Peppers. He developed taste and feedback, right? Action produces feedback. So he put stuff out and he figured out why it did or didn't work. And that's where he built it. He didn't build it by getting hired entry level and doing repetitive work. And I think it's a fascinating insight for all of us around this concept when you hear headlines like, is AI coming for entry-level jobs? Or the persistent question like, how do we build up discernment and judgment if we don't come up through the caste system? We need to make our kids people of action. I tell people all the time in college, startups, you can do a startup for nothing now, the ChatGPT and the cloud. You should have launched something by your senior year because that feedback will make you better than if you went to work at Meta and did rinse and repeat work for 3 years waiting for your big goal.
So we should all be the Rick Rubins of marketing.
We should all be entrepreneurs. As opposed to like Sheldon Cooper. Right? Because there's this into this back, other end. Memorized a bunch of stuff. Developed a lot of repeatable processes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good logic.
They can't
Sheldon
get a
Cooper is definitely on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
All right, so final question. What will be the most valuable skill for researchers in an AI-driven future? Is it business, storytelling, and influence, prompt and AI fluency? Is it critical thinking and interpretation, creativity, or human empathy and understanding? Interesting. So no human empathy and understanding in this.
Sad.
There it is. A couple of
So this is good. I thought prompting and AI fluency would be number 1, but this is interesting. So Tim, what do you think about these results in terms of how they're stacking up?
It's a combo platter. I really do. I think it's just like our free AI jobs. I mean, my work in insights goes back to working for Dr. Henry Denning in the 1980s, just looking at flow charts and statistical analysis and trying to make sense of it for the factory. So it's like we made a collection of skills then, and they're kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling is always going to be at the top. It's a super skill. It requires a worldview. It requires lateral thinking. It would require an unspeakable amount of computed test time to create a novel story that is highly contextual to a person's, the audience's situation. So I think that's a huge moat. Although I do say, never think about AI can't do that, I can do that, AI can't do that. Always add the word yeah, because you sound like one of those storm chasers on Discovery Channel, and you think you can outrun a tornado. That's not the mentality, right? Think about we're in March Madness. I hate to use a Duke example because it triggers some people from the East Coast. But Coach K always said, don't look at the scoreboard, just focus on the next play. So I tell people in this business of insight, what's the next play for me? So right now the next play for me is leveraging AI to conduct EV, expected value calculations. It's the game changer of all current use cases in insights. And that's where, through context, you can determine positive, negative outcomes for bets. If you read the book On the Edge by Nate Silver, it unpacks how it means the heart of trading, bioscience, crypto, everything is based on strong EV muscle. Well, that's a new one. And that's a really fascinating challenge now to think about getting good at that.
What do you say, if audiences sitting out here and they're I want to get better at prompt engineering, but how do I go about that? What are some, maybe 3 takeaways? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but...
No, first of all, use more meta prompting and then study what you got back. Meta prompting is when you put together what you're trying to accomplish and the context that would help this prompt engineer write a better prompt for you. and very clear guardrails of like, I want the return you give me to have the following features, I want the following filters, etc. So what you would do is you would go to, and this really works best with paid. I tell people, like, if you're on free chat GPT, good lord, are you on like broadcast television with 2 rabbit ears? It's $20. It's a Netflix subscription, okay? So you're on paid, and you go there and you say you are a experienced prompt engineer and you're fluent in markdown language, because models speak markdown, they don't speak English. We say natural language, that's not true. They take the natural language and they convert it into markdown. That's how they speak. If you don't believe me, read some of this stuff on Moltbot. Agents talk in markdown. So I want you to help me, and I did one yesterday. We're looking to spend X thousands of dollars with this vendor to do a 20,000 person survey because the nature of it requires a larger PAM. You know how expensive that is. That's big time expensive. So this is the bet. It will produce this insight for this audience, and this is our distribution plan, and this is the return model, which will be lead generation based on this LTV cap, lifetime value of customer acquisition cost. So these are all the factors. So I want you to run an expected value on this investment, and let me know if I'm being emotional, if it's really blessed, like we think it is anecdotally. And then so it might ask me a few questions before it writes the prompt, and it goes off and thinks, and they get this long markdown prompt. And it basically says, this is the goal, this is the reasoning stages, your step-by-step, what the model's gonna do in stages, how it's gonna iterate, here's a rubric for what a successful return looks like. Maybe here's a fact-checking step where it uses an adversarial agent to look at all the links to see if it's primary or secondary. So if it's secondary, it has to go find the primary. If it needs login information to read the primary to verify, it really said 67% do it. And it's all there. And then the return is going to come back in this format, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and so you get a long prompt. And then you read it. You are now like a software engineer looking at code. So you hear vibe coding, I want you to think vibe insights, the same thing. So that's the number one thing you can do, is go look at great work by using meta prompting instead of trying to just write your own prompt for a use case you've never done. Like for things you use it for all the time, you'll eventually have your own prompts. And I suggest you invest in a tool called Text Expander. Because I have Text Expander, because there's these prompts you use all the time. Text Expander allows you to just like Control-6, and there's the prompt. So it's kind of a process, but it starts with meta prompting.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have questions, give us a ground.